This is Joshua Hart for Seconds Out here today with Gareth A Davies. Gareth, as always, really appreciate your time and how is everything?
Good, it's becoming a regular thing. It's almost like the Hart and Davis show every Monday or Tuesday, isn't it? It's gone on for about 6 weeks now. We've got to stop meeting like this.
Just moving into the boxing talk, it was a sad weekend in boxing as we lost two legends of the game in different aspects in both George Foreman and Colin Hart. Uh,
Mm.
we'll go in with Colin Hart first because I feel in our sense here, I've only spoke to Colin a handful of times, but he was a great person to speak to. I've watched other interviews where you've mentioned how big of a mentor he was to you.
Absolutely.
Um, just what are your like best memories with Colin?
Um, just how much, obviously we became really, really good friends, and he's almost like a father figure to me in boxing. But he was like a barometer. You could check whether you were on the money with things or not. Obviously the era he loved was the Four Kings and the three great heavyweights that he covered with Ali Frazier and Foreman. So it's peculiar that he passed in the same 24 hours as George Foreman. Not to mention, of course, he wrote columns with Frank Bruno in The Sun for years, Byline in The Sun, 55 years. He was a doyen of journalism. He could have written leader columns. He had opinions on everything. He wrote 5 papers a day, never had a mobile phone, wasn't distracted easily from what he was doing, and came from a different era, where he'd started on the papers at the age of 17 or maybe even 15, had done his national service, then come back, been a crime reporter. He was an absolute machine when it came to memories of things, of stories, of from a different era. I mean, I always used to kind of live vicariously through him, different eras where they used to be around a big fight for a month, the group of the journos, and they'd see the boxers every day and spend 2 hours with them. And I'm talking about with the likes of Ali and Foreman and those kind of guys. So he was a very he look, anyone that does a job up to the age of almost 90 and keeps doing it and writing their columns and goes to events, and he came to one of the Riyadh events as well, as a guest of Turki Al Sheikh. He genuinely was a legend. He comes from a time when they spoke their copy in and they sent telegrams with their stories, and they sent their stories from the Rumble in the Jungle by telegram. He had so many stories. He had a memory like it was almost encyclopedic yet photographic, and he was also an insomniac. So he'd always say, "No, it's fine to ring me 11 o'clock at night." We'd be on the phone for 2 hours talking about things again and again and again. And a lunch after a press conference, we'd end up still talking there at 4, 5 o'clock sometimes in the afternoon. So he was a great guy and genuine like a father figure, certainly to me, but probably to other people as well. And when my book came out recently, I no greater praise than Colin ringing me and saying it's brilliant. He didn't ring me. I saw him at the Outernet for a press conference. He said it's brilliant. I'm not joking. That meant so much to me. So she'll miss him dearly. She'll miss him absolutely dearly. And I tell this story to everyone. Used to look across at him and he'd go, he can't fucking punch. And when you think he comes from the East End and Lord Heart of Harrow, I called him, and he bled claret and blue of West Ham. He was just so funny when I will always remember that. Can't fucking punch when we're watching ringside. No names named, but no, he's just brilliant. I miss him, really miss him. We'll really miss him.
What legacy does he leave behind for us now as journalists as well? He was a real icon in British boxing journalism, wasn't he?
Yeah, but it's because he covered that whole period that I just mentioned. That he started in the late 50s, and there's very few people around who've worked 70 years in a profession, and who are there's an old Chinese proverb about when you learn an art, a martial art, you do it for your whole life. and he was like a sensei in a sense. If he was a martial artist, he'd be one of the old senseis, and he was for journalism. Like I say, he was a craftsman. His columns were pithy, accurate, and punchy. If I can use that expression, and they were still relevant today. And he kept it simple, but the pillars of journalism he kept to very closely because that's what he knew. He travelled around the world for 6 decades. He'd had bylines in the Sun for 55 years. And I've been quite long in the game now myself, but when I think to myself that, God, I'd have to go on, 28 more years doing this, what an incredible thing he had. I remember him telling me once a while ago, a long time ago, the most important thing in journalism, yes, to be good at writing and all those things and be, have all the qualities you need, but he said stamina. Stamina in print journalism was the most important thing, because when you're exhausted, you still need to be able to operate in any time zone around the world. Stamina. I'll never forget that. I haven't said that actually in the whole time I've spoken about Colin over the last 2 or 3 days. Stamina.
Well, it was a beautiful set of words then. You mentioned his favourite era being that Forking era and the Ali Fraser Foreman era, and passing this within the same 24 hours as George Foreman. George Foreman, a real icon in the heavyweight division, shook up the scene 20 years on from first winning the titles. He leaves behind a brilliant legacy, doesn't he?
Well, you said it, and that's probably the most, in boxing terms, the most unique thing about him, that no one else has done that 20 years apart. I was on talking to Tom Gray, the managing editor of Ring magazine, earlier on my Fight Night Extra show on Talk Sport, and I couldn't think of anyone, and Tom would know because he's very historical about boxing. There isn't anyone that's done what he did. But when you add in the Foreman grill and the association with Ali, and then what he'd done to Foreman and Norton, to Frazier and Norton going into that fight, and he loses the Rumble in the Jungle, and he turns it all back on himself, and he loves the association with Ali. He becomes a preacher from this growling figure that had won the world title back in the 70s, knocking people out. One of the most dangerous punchers in heavyweight boxing history, right up there with the very best. My number four in the history of the heavyweight division, he is as well. And the fact I got to interview him probably a dozen times, and he was so kind, big booming, beautiful voice, great aura, very spiteful fighter though, remember, and just so present whenever you spoke to him, and how he talked about his loss to Ali as a blessing in his life, and the association with Ali became very important for him. Anyone that's had, I think it's 12 kids he had, he names 5 of them George. He's bought 5 boys George. What a character. The fact he had his own church in Houston. One of my big regrets, by the way, is not going to his sermon. I said it for years and years, I've got to go to his sermons. One of my massive regrets in my career is not going to one of his sermons. Amazing character, absolute privilege to be around him. Quotes machine when you interviewed him. Weirdly, with both Colin and George, I think I've been very fortunate towards the end of their lives. We did My Life in Boxing, Spencer, Oliver and I, 5 weeks ago with Colin Hart. It's available right now on the boxing YouTube channel at Talk Sports. And he was brilliant, Colin, by the way, telling stories for an hour in the studio. And it's visual, so it's actual TV show. And I spoke to George last year, and I know I had to hustle very hard to get the interview, through Bill Kaplan, a very good friend of mine who was George's PR guy from his age of 18. I know not many people interviewed George about the 50th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle, and him telling me this amazing story about what Ali took away from him, but what he gave him, and how he fought 5 men in one night soon afterwards to get his mental fortitude back. Yeah, it was an exhibition, but just I spoke to him for 20 minutes. He wasn't feeling too well. The line wasn't that good, and I was writing notes. I actually took a photograph of the 6 pages of A4 that I was just scribbling notes at the time. I'd recorded it audio in audio terms, but I was scribbling notes. I've actually taken a photo of it because when I wrote it out, Josh, the quotes were just extraordinary and it just wrote itself almost. And George was very special like that. The man had a message. And I hope he's sitting up there with Ali and Colin having a little giggle after them all having gone to glory on the other side now.
The one thing that I found so remarkable with George Foreman's career, obviously I wasn't around in that era, but looking back on it and doing research on it is after that fight with Jimmy Young where he lost on points and then fell extremely ill and said that in that time where he was in a sense gone, he'd seen hellish things and it was almost a calling from God to change his life and to go away from there, become an ordained minister, and then 10 years on, come back. It's I think it is probably one of the most remarkable boxing stories I think we'll see for the rest of the time.
Yeah, and you can add to that. I completely agree, and you can add to that that he was built like a bull elephant, of a man, So, because again, he said last October to me that he never lost faith in his physicality when he went away from the sport. I mean, he didn't train. He said, I was able to go and eat burgers and do what I wanted for almost 10 years. But he said, I never lost faith in my own physicality and my own strength. And when I came back in that second iteration, he was calmer, he was more present, and he still had the power. And when you think that he lost to Evander Holyfield in that run as well, I mean, I think it took him 18 or 19 fights to win the world title back when he came back, something like that. He fought Evander Holyfield in 1991, I believe. And even though he lost that night, he told me, I knew I could win the world title again. I knew I still had it in me. He used Holyfield as a barometer. I mean, he went 12 rounds with Holyfield, and he got well beaten. I think 9-3 were a couple of the judges' scorecards on rounds. So, no, an incredible man, an incredible life well lived. And talking, about journalism. I mean, I was working bare knuckle in Wolverhampton on Saturday night, and I woke up in the morning to lots of calls and requests, and literally worked up until I had the planning meeting for the broadcast on BKB 38 in Wolverhampton that was going out on Vice in the United States and different channels, and it was incredible to go over pieces that I'd written and put it together and write a timeline of his life, speak to Sky News about him, speak to Al Jazeera. I did BBC Radio 4 p.m. programme with Rima, the presenter. It was really nice to have the opportunity to reminisce, like it was to write an obit for Colin that's in the Telegraph today. It's very gratifying when these people have meant so much to you in the industry that they're getting their worth. They're getting recognised for what they did and being an inspiration for us,
Absolutely. Some beautiful words there, Gareth. Just moving on from that and just looking at a little bit of relevant news at the moment. We've been informed that Anthony Joshua is currently injured and won't be back punching properly for another 8 weeks, delaying the comeback, according to Eddie Hearn.
What, against Jake Paul?
I was going to come on to that, or should we go straight in with that? What did
Yeah,
you
go on, whatever you want. We've only got another 5 minutes, I think. So,
what were
yeah.
what was your first reaction to seeing Jake Paul sit there on his podcast and say that Anthony Joshua has no chin, has no skill, and that Jake Paul believes he could beat Anthony Joshua?
Well, he's wrong on all three counts for a start. But when my phone started pinging at 7:30 in the morning on Saturday, my first thought was, obviously I wasn't thinking something had happened to George, the great George, big George Foreman. I thought, wow, my first thought was, has Joshua signed to fight Jake Paul? It's not a fight that is completely beyond the bounds because it's a win-win for Anthony Joshua. Jake Paul is completely limited compared to Anthony Joshua, who's still an active, very dangerous elite heavyweight, but would obviously have to play the game if he fought Jake Paul. Right now, when you look at the heavyweight division, the injury notwithstanding, the one guy who's not moving in the division and looking like he's got a fight, I had the Ring Magazine rankings up earlier. You've got who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it, so to speak, a year ago that we'd be looking at the rankings and Fury and Joshua will be the two guys we weren't talking about being in fights. Usyk's probably going to fight Dubois. Parker will maybe fight the winner. Kabayel, we don't know at the moment. Zhilei Zhang, we don't know. Filip Hrgovic is fighting Joe Joyce. He's number 8. Martin Bakole is fighting F.A. Jagber in May. And Fabio Wardley, we understand, is fighting a big name American at Portman Road in the summer. That's my understanding anyway. Joshua is definitely out now, you're saying, till May or the end of May. Well, he's got to get fit again. The other thing is there's a possibility if Daniel Dubois, if Parker goes in a different direction, a rematch with Daniel Dubois if he beats Usyk is a possibility. Because Joshua is such a commercial success and Fury Joshua, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, certainly my understanding behind the scenes is not, because Joshua is such a big commercial draw. If Dubois beats Usyk and it's not Parker next, and I think it should be Parker, Joshua's sitting there ready for the rematch. So, the world's his oyster in lots of ways. It's how much he's got left and does he really want to fight? The same question for Tyson Fury.
Just last one. How big of a chance do you give Jake Paul in a fight with Anthony Joshua?
Absolutely zero chance of Jake Paul beating Anthony Joshua. It's almost 100% guaranteed he's going to get hurt unless it's an exhibition. Now, I don't think Anthony Joshua is the kind of guy that can hold back. So we shall see. It's a big tease, I think. I think it's a big tease, but there's a weird, even just kind of projecting it. If Tyson Fury saw Anthony Joshua in the ring with Jake Paul, it might just tempt him back.
Really?
Well, he's looking at it. Look, Jake Paul is a marketing genius. Of that, there's absolutely no doubt. So, and I've said it for a very, very long time. But fighting a 6'7" heavyweight who's 2 stone heavier than him, who isn't a guy that's going to tippy-tappy around him. It's very different to Canelo at his stage in his career. Canelo would have played the game. I'm not sure Anthony Joshua will play the game with Jake Paul.
Fair enough. Well, Gareth, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time as always. Always good to catch up, and I'm sure we'll speak again probably around this time next week. So see you then,
Great
Gareth.
to see you, Josh. I'm going to be in America next week, but I will speak to you from America. No problem at all. I'm doing the BKB 39 bare knuckle brawl from Myrtle Beach, South Florida. And we've got Jack Marshman challenging Cub Hawkins for I think it's the cruiserweight title. Jack Marshman of UFC and the military fame, the Welshman, is challenging over there. So I'm over there covering that and doing a bit of commentary on the event.
Well, fair enough. Gareth, speak soon, mate. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers, Josh.